In the theater of American politics, controversy is never far from the spotlight. The halls of Congress echo with debate, and the nation's most pressing issues are often shaped by those willing to challenge the prevailing winds. Few voices disrupt the status quo like Senator Rand Paul. With a reputation for independence and a willingness to stand alone, Paul has become a lightning rod for both criticism and admiration. Known for his libertarian streak and fierce advocacy for civil liberties, Paul has ignited a firestorm by challenging not only Democrats but also his own Republican colleagues over the recent U.S. military strikes near Venezuela. His stance has sent shockwaves through the Senate, sparking heated debates and drawing national attention. The Trump administration frames these strikes as a necessary part of the ongoing war on drugs, arguing that decisive action is needed to protect American interests and curb the flow of narcotics. But Paul sees a deeper violation, one that strikes at the heart of American values, due process, and the sanctity of life. He questions whether military force should ever be used without clear evidence, legal justification, or congressional approval. He's accused fellow Republicans of hypocrisy, openly questioning how they can claim to be pro-life while supporting deadly military actions against people who haven't been tried or convicted in any court of law. Paul's arguments have exposed deep divisions within the party, as some defend the strikes as necessary for national security, while others quietly share his concerns about overreach and unintended consequences. Paul's blunt language and unwavering principles have isolated him from some in his party, but they have also amplified his warning about the dangers of unchecked executive power and the risks of endless military intervention. He warns that allowing presidents to act unilaterally sets a dangerous precedent, eroding the constitutional balance of power and threatening the very foundations of American democracy. He's not just criticizing, he's taking action. Paul is pushing for a Senate resolution that would rein in the president's authority to wage undeclared wars, demanding that Congress reclaim its constitutional role in decisions of war and peace. His proposed legislation seeks to restore accountability and ensure that military force is used only as a last resort, with full transparency and public debate. This confrontation is forcing a national debate about the limits of presidential power, the true cost of foreign intervention, and the core principles America is willing to defend. As the controversy unfolds, the nation must grapple with difficult questions about justice, security, and the meaning of American leadership in a complex world. At the heart of Paul's critique is a challenge to his party's moral consistency. On the Joe Rogan Experience, he called out Republicans who claim to be pro-life but, in his words, don't give a sur about these people in the boats. Paul argues that valuing life can't be selective. If life is sacred, it applies to everyone, even suspected traffickers. He questions how one can mourn the unborn, yet endorse military actions that kill without trial. For Paul, a true pro-life ethic means skepticism of war and state violence, not just opposition to abortion. He's demanding his colleagues confront whether their commitment to life is a universal principle or just a political slogan. The controversy centers on U.S. military operations targeting go-fast boats near Venezuela, justified as anti-fentanyl missions. The administration claims these are cartel vessels, but the strikes are swift, destructive, and far from U.S. shores. Paul questions the legality and morality of using overwhelming force against unproven targets thousands of miles away. He's raised alarms that these actions may violate international law, especially if survivors are being targeted. The operations blur the line between law enforcement and war, raising urgent questions about evidence, oversight, and the true cost of intervention. The debate now is not just about tactics, but about the very principles guiding U.S. foreign policy. Paul's skepticism runs deep. He doubts the administration's claim that these boats are carrying fentanyl to the U.S. He argues the boats' range makes it impossible for them to reach U.S. shores. They're likely headed to nearby Caribbean islands, possibly carrying cocaine to Europe. The real tragedy, Paul says, is that those on board are probably poor Venezuelans or Colombians, desperate for work, not cartel kingpins. He cites Coast Guard data showing many boats stopped on suspicion are innocent, often just fishing vessels. With a shoot first, ask questions never policy, the risk of killing innocents is unacceptably high. Paul warns that using lethal force based on shaky intelligence is a moral and strategic disaster. The policy, he argues, turns the war on drugs into a war on the poor. The most disturbing allegation from Paul is that U.S. forces are attacking survivors left in the water after their boats are destroyed. According to Paul, these are not isolated incidents, but part of a troubling pattern that has emerged in recent months. Survivors, already traumatized by the violence and chaos of a shipwreck, are reportedly being targeted as they struggle to stay afloat, clinging to debris or desperately signaling for help. The idea that military personnel might be ordered or permitted to fire on unarmed, defenseless people in the open sea is deeply unsettling, raising urgent questions about the conduct and oversight of these operations. If true, this would violate international law and the military's own code of justice. Attacking shipwrecked survivors is considered a war crime. The Geneva Conventions and other treaties explicitly protect those who are no longer able to fight, including shipwrecked sailors and civilians. Such actions would not only undermine America's moral standing in the world, but could also expose U.S. service members and commanders to prosecution for war crimes. The legal and ethical implications are enormous, and the consequences could reverberate far beyond the Caribbean. Paul insists that firing on defenseless people in the water is not law enforcement, but summary execution. He argues that these actions cross a line that should never be crossed, even in the pursuit of national security or the war on drugs. The difference between upholding the law and committing atrocities, he says, is clear, and the U.S. must be held to the highest standard. He's demanding a full investigation into the rules of engagement and transparency about what's happening in the Caribbean. Paul wants Congress to hold hearings to question military leaders under oath and to ensure that any violations are brought to light. He believes that only through rigorous oversight and public scrutiny can the truth be uncovered and justice served. Paul believes most Americans would be appalled to learn the military is killing helpless survivors. He argues that the American public, if fully informed, would demand accountability and insist on a return to the values that define the nation. The shock and outrage could spark a national debate about the true cost of the war on drugs and the moral boundaries of military action. This charge isn't just about flawed policy, it's about a potential collapse of moral and legal discipline. If these allegations are proven true, it would signal a dangerous erosion of the principles that are supposed to guide U.S. conduct, both at home and abroad. The integrity of the military and the nation's commitment to justice are at stake. By exposing these practices, Paul is forcing a reckoning with the true cost of the war on drugs. He's challenging the government to confront uncomfortable truths and to take responsibility for actions carried out in the nation's name. The debate he's ignited could reshape public understanding of the conflict and its consequences. He wants accountability from the Pentagon and the White House, and answers for Congress and the public. Paul's call for transparency and justice is a demand that the nation live up to its ideals, even in the most difficult and dangerous circumstances. Paul sees the boat strikes as part of a larger, more dangerous agenda. He argues the anti-drug narrative is a smokescreen for a broader campaign to destabilize and possibly overthrow Venezuela's government. Each strike, he says, is a calculated provocation, building a case for direct intervention against President Maduro. Paul warns that these actions could escalate into open conflict, bypassing Congress and public debate. The strikes, he believes, are a manufactured justification for war, a casus belli, designed to win public support for regime change. By exposing this, Paul hopes to stop escalation and force a real discussion about the consequences of another war in Latin America. He calls it a looming disaster, costly, illegal, and fundamentally at odds with American principles. Paul's warnings don't stop at Venezuela. He fears the same logic could soon justify military action in Mexico. He points to President Trump's rhetoric about cartels running Mexico, and the suggestion that something's going to have to be done. If attacking boats near Venezuela is justified by cartel activity, Paul argues, what stops the administration from bombing Mexico next? Such an act would be catastrophic, an act of war against a key neighbor, shattering diplomatic and economic ties. Paul sees the Venezuelan operation as a test run for even riskier interventions. He warns that unchecked executive power erodes national sovereignty and makes war a matter of presidential whim. His plea: recognize the dangers before this path leads to a crisis on America's own border. Paul isn't just speaking out, he's taking action. He's leading a Senate resolution to limit the president's ability to attack Venezuela without congressional approval, invoking the War Powers Resolution. Paul argues these strikes are acts of war and require explicit authorization from Congress. Forcing a vote puts every senator on record. Do they support unchecked executive action or constitutional limits? Even if the resolution faces long odds, it's a crucial stand for congressional authority. For Paul, this is about restoring the balance of power and preventing unauthorized wars. It's the legislative embodiment of his lifelong fight for non-intervention and constitutional government. At its core, Paul's crusade is about the universal value of human life, a principle that transcends borders, politics, and personal beliefs. He stands firm in the conviction that every individual, no matter their background or the accusations against them, is entitled to the basic rights that form the foundation of a just society. Central to this is the necessity of due process. Without it, the very idea of justice becomes hollow, and the rights we claim to cherish are rendered meaningless. Paul argues passionately that every person, regardless of nationality or suspicion, deserves to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. This presumption is not just a legal technicality, it is a safeguard against tyranny and a shield for the vulnerable. The current policy of summary execution at sea, he says, betrays America's ideals and weakens the rule of law. When the government acts as judge, jury, and executioner, it undermines the very freedoms it claims to protect. Paul links this to his challenge on pro-life consistency. He questions how one can claim to value life in one context, yet support state-sanctioned killing without trial in another. He insists that you can't claim to value life while supporting state-sanctioned killing without trial. True respect for life must be unwavering, even when it is inconvenient or politically unpopular. That's why he's demanding a full investigation. Who authorized the strikes, what were the rules, and were they followed? He wants transparency, not just for the sake of politics, but to ensure that the government remains accountable to the people it serves. He asks, how many have died? Each name represents a life, a story, and a family forever changed. These are not just numbers, they are human beings whose rights and dignity must be acknowledged. Paul insists on accountability, to prevent abuses from becoming the norm. Without oversight, unchecked power can erode the very freedoms that define America. His message is clear. America's strength lies not in force or fear, but in its unwavering commitment to justice, liberty, and the rule of law. These are the values that have inspired generations and drawn people from around the world. The sanctity of every life, regardless of circumstance, is what truly sets America apart. It is a promise that must be kept, not just in words, but in actions. It's a call to confront the moral consequences of our actions, to reflect on the kind of nation we want to be, and to ensure that our policies reflect our deepest values. In the end, Paul urges us to defend the principles that define the nation: justice, accountability, and a steadfast respect for human life, so that America remains a beacon of hope and freedom for all.